How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Dalet, Daf 24 of Masechta Sanhedrin. Friends, it's going to be, I think, a relatively interesting daf. I think in Perek is that Borer. We're going to start on Daf Chav Dalet Amud Aleph, 4 lines before it gets wide. Gufa Amr Rish Lakish. So Rish Lakish had said yesterday, Pekadosh Yom Adavar Zeh Tni Eido, right? That Reb Meir had said in the Mishnah that you could passel somebody's witnesses. The question is, how can you passel somebody's witnesses? How can you just say, that the witnesses are passel? There's 2 witnesses, they're trusted. So therefore, Rish Lakish says, Pekadosh Yom Adavar Zeh. How could it be that such a holy mouth like Reb Meir's would say something like this, that you could just wholesale passel witnesses? Rather, he says it's talking about one witness who is accepted upon, whatever you accept him as he is too, fine. But the question is, we're going to focus on really what the Gemara is interested in is, it seems strange that Rish Lakish would refer to somebody else as Peh Kadosh. That Rish Lakish, somebody on such a high stature, as Rish Lakish would refer to somebody else as a holy mouth. But Ula says, is Rish Lakish b'Beis HaMedrash. Somebody says Rish Lakish in the Beis HaMedrash, in the study hall. It's as if he's like uprooting mountains and grinding them against each other. That's how high of a level he is. So it seems strange that he referred to somebody else as, you're giving him honor, giving him kavod, calling him a Peh Kodesh. Ravina says, but 1 second, we're talking about Rish Lakish, talking about Reb Meir. Now, anybody who sees Reb Meir in the Beis HaMedrash, Reb Meir, it's as if he's uprooting mountains of mountains and grinding them upon each other. Reb Meir was on an even higher level. So this is what's going on. Borei, come and see. Come and see how much kavod Rish Lakish shows towards Reb Meir. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, come and see how much the people in Eretz Yisrael give kavod to one another. The Yosef Rebbe, for example, right? Similarly, so we saw that Rish Lakish gave kavod to Reb Meir. Similarly, Rebbe was sitting, and we've seen this before. And Rebbe says it's forbidden to insulate even cold things on the holy Shabbos. Now, Rabbi Yoshi's son, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosi, says to Rebbe, my father, Rabbi Yosi, take permitted to insulate cold stuff on Shabbos. Omar lay, so Rebbe responds, well, if that's the case, if that's the case, well, your father Rebbe Yosi says it's mutter, so azoi, it's mutter. Rav Papa comes up, so says Rav Papa, come and see how much respect they have for one another. Because if Rabbi Yosi was alive, he would have deferred to Rebbe. Now, Rabbi Yosi, of course, was on the highest level, right? Of all Rabbi Akiva's students, right? We say Rabbi Yosi passing like Rabbi Yosi Nimuko Imo. Rabbi Yosi was on a very high level. Rebbe was the next generation, yet still, Rebbe as the Nasi, Rabbi Yosi would defer to Rebbe. The Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosi Memali Mokim Avos of Hava, his son Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosi filled his place, and as Rashi says, Choshuv Ka'aviv, that he was as important as his father. The Ka'amar, where am I? Memali Mokim Avos of Hava, V'Heyukofiv V'Yoshev V'nei Rebbe, and Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosi would defer to Rebbe, and therefore the assumption is that Rabbi Yosi also would have deferred to Rebbe. V'ka'amar kvar zaken, and even so, Rebbe still says, well, if Rabbi Yosi says it's mutter, azoi, we're going to say that it is mutter. Rabbi Yosi already paskin. So we see the level of honor that these rabbis show and give to one another. Amr Beishaya, Says B'shai Ma'idich, what does the pasuk mean? V'ekach li shnei maklis, and I took for myself 2 staffs. Le'echad karasi noyam, u'le'echad karasi choivlim. One of them I called pleasantness. The other one I said the opposite of pleasantness. Noyam elu tamidei chachamim shebeis Yisrael shmanim ze'ezeh ba'aloche. Pleasantness is a reference to the sages in Eretz Yisrael, that they are pleasant to one another. Excuse me, in halacha. Chovlim, and I don't know how do you pronounce chovlim, but like roughness, I guess. Elu tamidei chacham shebebavel. Those are the sages in Bavel, shemechablan ze'loz b'halacha, that they're very rough and tough on one another in halacha. Vayomer, and he says, Eile shnei bnei Yitzur ha'omdim v'gomer. These are the 2 sons of olive oil that are standing, v'shnayim zeisim alea, and 2 olive trees. So Yitzur, so when it refers to olive oil, Omer B'Yitzchak, Eilu Tamid Chacham Shabbeitz Yisrael, that's olive oil is a reference to the Torah scholars in Israel, Shenochin Zelos Ba'aloche, that they're very pleasant to one another in halacha, just like olive oil is very pleasant. Kashem and Zayis, like olive oil. Vishnayim Zeisim Oleh, when we're talking about 2 olive trees, Eilu Tamid Chacham Shabbeitz, that's a reference to the Torah scholars in Bavel, Shemerurin Zelos Ba'aloche, that they're bitter towards one another in halacha, kizayis, like an olive tree. And I lift up my eyes, and I see hivine shtayim noshim yitzes. There are 2 women going out, and there is wind in their wings. V'laheno knafayim kikanfe achsida, and they have wings like the wings of a chasida. Vatisena ha'efa bin hashmayim v'n haaretz, and they were holding a efa measurement between heaven and earth. Va'omar malach adover bi, and I say to the angel who is speaking to me, Ono ema melichos efa, where are they taking this efa measurement to? Vayomer elai, and he says to me, livnois labayis be'ed Shinner, to build a house in the land of Shinner. Omer bechen sebechem shemshim ben yechai ze chanufa v'gasas haruach. That when it says v'ruach b'chanfeim, that's a reference to gasus haruach, and when it says achsida, it's a reference to like chanufa, like flattery, just like the chasida bird, that it's unkosher, but it makes it seem like it's kosher. All right. So it's a reference to chanufa and gasus haruach sheyardu lebavel, that they descended. Chanufa and gasus haruach descended on Bavel. V'gasus haruach lebavel nachis. Is that really true? That gasus haruach descended on Bavel? We said Asar Kabin Gasus Yardul Olam, that 10 measures of haughtiness, of Gasus, came down to the world. Tishanot le'elam. 9 of them were claimed by Elam, V'achas kol Olam kulo, and the 10th measure was divided equally among the rest of the world. So it sounds like Gasus went to Elam, not to Bavel. In the Bavel Nachis, so we say, look, Itaka initially went to Bavel, but then ultimately went to Elam and settled there. You can also infer from the fact that it says Livnos la bayis beretz Shinner, meaning initially it talked about Ruach b'kanfeim and Kikanfe Achsida. We talked about Chnufa, we talked about Gasus HaRuach, but then ultimately it says Livnos la, to it, bayis beretz Shinner, meaning only one of them remained. So Shmamina, only Chnufa remained, but Gasus HaRuach traveled on to Elam. But we said, similar Gasus HaRuach Anius. But we said that the sign for Gasus HaRuach is poverty. Vanius, the Bavel Nachas, and there's plenty of poverty in Bavel, so it sounds like it remained in Bavel. So my Anius Torah. No, Anius that's connected to Gasus HaRuach is a reference to Anius, poverty when it comes to Torah. And that was in Elam. Our sister is young, is small, and she has no breasts. Amr Rabbi Yechanan says Rabbi Yechanan, it's Elam. It's a reference to Elam. Shezach Salomot, that they learn, Velozach Salam, but they don't teach. Okay, so I guess the point being that in Elam they had a certain poverty when it comes to Torah, and that is where Gasus HaRuach, hardiness, is found. My Bavel, what's pshat with Bavel? Amr Rabbi Yechanan, Blula b'Mikra, it's saturated with Mikra. Blula b'Mishnah, it's saturated with Mishnais. Blula b'Talmud, it's saturated with Talmud. B'machshakim oishivan kimesei olam, you have placed me in the dark places like the dead of the world. Amr Rabbi Yirmiyah is a Talmud shel Bavel. This is a Talmud Bavli, because apparently in Bavel they would discuss and argue and this and that. and at the end there was no like clear answer, I guess, necessarily, and things you would kind of leave in a bit of a darkness, unclear what the conclusion is. Okay. Well, that was a nice little agadic kind of thing. Next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Amalo, Neman olai abba, Neman olai avicha, Neman olai shloisha roye bakar. So if you accept upon yourself, let's say you have Shimon and Reuven, right? Shimon lends Reuven $1,000, now they end up in court, and they say, let's say Reuven says, we're going to talk about in the Gemara exactly who's saying what, but let's say Reuven says, look, I know my father or your father are not allowed to be judges because they're relatives, but it's okay. I don't mind. I don't mind if they judge it. There's these 3 cattle herdsmen who are not big Talmidei Chacham, but okay, Beseder, I don't mind. They could. I don't mind if they judge us. So Meir says, look, I mean, even though they say, yeah, okay, I don't mind if these people who aren't allowed to judge us. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, they're people who are not qualified to judge, and at any time, or we're going to discuss in the Gemara exactly to what extent, but be'etzem, you could change your mind. Even though you initially accepted them, you could change your mind, because ultimately they're not kosher judges. But Chacham disagree, and they say, no, if you accepted them as a judge, so you have to accept your decision. Alright, I gotta rub my nose 1 second. Alright. Sorry, Mom. Okay. Where are we? So let's say Reuven needs to swear to Shimon. And Shimon says, you know what, Reuven, instead of going to Bezdin and holding a Sefer Torah and doing a whole big thing, how about this? Just swear to me, Betzim. Just like swear on your life, Kilu. Make a swear to me. Instead of we don't have to go to Bezdin, just swear to me, that's enough. Rameir says that Shimon, I think it's Shimon can change his mind and afterwards say, you know what, I actually changed my mind, I want to go to Bezdin. Whereas the Chacham say, no, if he said that it's enough for me, if you simply just, swear on your life without going to Bezdin, so he has to stick with that. Okay. Now, says the Gemara, Omer of Dimi Beidu of Nachman Beidu of Yosef, Kigon de Kibli Ole Bechad. Okay, so it says of Dimi Beidu of Nachman Beidu of Yosef that it's so. For example, the situation of Neman Ole Abba, right? So let's say Reuven says, I accept, let's say your father, let's say, to be a judge. So we're talking about where not to judge alone, but to judge with 2 other kosher judges. And even so, even though he accepted the father, and he's judging together with 2 other kosher judges, still Reb Meir says he can renege. Okay. So it says that the machlokes between Reb Meir and the Chacham about can you renege, can't you renege, is b'machul lach. So for example, Shimon says to Reuven, you owe $1,000. They end up in court. So machulach means that court rules in favor of Reuven that he can keep the money. Etein lach would be that the court rules in favor of Shimon, and therefore Reuven now has to pay Shimon money. So we're saying the machlokes between Reb Meir and the Chacham is when it comes to machulach. When the verdict is Reuven, you can keep the money. So Reb Meir says that, Shimon can change his mind and say, these judges aren't really kosher judges, I want kosher judges. And the Chacham say, no, he already accepted these judges, he's got to stick with it. Okay? But if it comes to etein loch, be'etzem, if the court ruled in favor of Shimon, and now Reuven has to pay the money, everyone agrees that Reuven can say, no, I'm not paying the money. These judges, they're not kosher judges, right? And therefore you're not going to take money away from me. You're not going to force me to pay you based on the ruling of these judges who aren't real judges. So there everybody would agree that they can't force Reuven to pay. Okay. So again, Amr Yehuda, Amr Shmuel, machlokes between Reb Meir, who says that you could renege, and the Chacham say you have to live with it, is b'machulach, is when be'etzim they rule in favor of Reuven that he can keep the money. That he doesn't need to pay anything to Shimon. But But if the ruling was that Reuven needs to pay Shimon, who's in favor of Shimon, of course Reuven can renege and say, you know what, I want real judges. I'm not paying out of my pocket until we get real judges. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan be'etin loch machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says that the machlokes is by etin loch, when they rule in favor of Shimon, and Reuven needs to pay the money to Shimon. And so machlokes, Rabbi Meir says, he could still Rabbi Meir says he can renege. The Chum say no, he can't renege and he has to pay Shimon. Now when Rabbi Yochanan says that the machlokes is by etin loch, does that imply that when it comes to machul loch, that when they rule in favor of Reuven, that he can hold on to it, everybody agrees that he can renege? So everybody agrees that everyone in Yochalach, right? Typically in Yochalach, that everyone agrees that in that case, when it comes to machul loch, when they rule in favor of Shimon, so then, I'm sorry, when they rule in favor of Reuven, that he can hold on to it, everybody would agree that Shimon can't say, I changed my mind. Okay. Or perhaps the machlokes is both. The Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that the machlokes applies even by etinach, right? Meaning the machlokes by etinach, but also by machulach. Tashma, come in here. Rava says Rav machlokes by etinach. Then Rava says machlokes is davka by etinach, but machulach. When it comes to machulach, divrei hakol en yochalach zabo. Everyone agrees that if they rule in favor of Reuven, that he can keep the money. Shimon can't say no, I changed my mind. Okay. So I understand if we say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the machlokes by etinach, but by machulach, everyone agrees Shimon can't renege. So Rava is saying like Rabbi Yochanan. But if you say that Rabbi Yochanan says that the machlokes is both by etinach and by machulach, then Rava come on, then who's Rava holding like, right? Because Rava is saying that the machlokes is by etinach, but by machulach, everyone agrees Shimon can't renege. So then, so if Rabbi Yochanan is saying that the machlokes, if that's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, so Rava is saying like Rabbi Yochanan. But if Rabbi Yochanan says the machlokes is also by machulach, then who's Rava going like? And for the Gemara, Rava Tamadinav Shekomer. Well, you can argue that Rava is just giving his own pshat. You could argue that there's three opinions. They're all Amoris. I mean, Rav is much younger, granted, but that Shmuel says that the machlokes is by machulach, by etinach. Everyone agrees that he can be choser. You could say that Rabbi Yochanan says that the machlokes is by both etinach and machulach, and Rav says the machlokes is by etinach but not by machulach. By machulach, everyone would agree that Shimon cannot be choser. Okay, you could say that. Eisvei, we have a kasha. We said in our Mishnah that if Reuven needed to swear to Shimon, and Shimon says to Reuven, you know what? Just swear to me on your life. Let's not go to Bezdin, just swear to me. Rav Meir says Shimon can change his mind and say, you know what, let's go to Bezdin. Chacham say Shimon can't change his mind. So my love, so let's say that what are we talking about? Reuven is swearing, right? Generally we say, right? Generally we swear, we say, right? That the general rule is that when you swear in order to prevent, so that you will not need to pay. In a few exceptional cases, you swear and then collect the money. But generally, you swear in order to prevent yourself having to pay. So be'etzim, this is a situation where Reuven is swearing so that he doesn't have to pay. So it's be'etzim a situation of macholach. He's swearing and then he can keep the money, he doesn't have to pay anything. And we're saying that there's this machlokes. So how could Rava say that machlokes davka by etinach but not by macholach? If we seem to be saying by the shvua, which is, we want to assume it's talking about a macholach situation, and we're saying it's a machlokes between Rav Meir and the Chacham. Davli kimacholach lo be'osan and nishbayin v'notlin. No, actually, the swear you could say is talking about a swear of nishbayin v'notlin, and we're saying that that's what's machlokas, so there's machlokas by etin loch. Davle ke etin loch. V'atana le reisha, but if it's talking about etin loch, if according to Rava, the reisha is talking about etin loch, and the sefer is talking about etin loch, right? The reisha is talking about, Abu Vavicha is talking about etin loch, and the sefer that's talking about Dorli b'chai roscha is also talking about etin loch. So why do we need the same thing twice? So Tanatola b'das acherim v'Tanatola b'das atzma. Well, they're different. In the reisha of Neman ole Abba, Neman ole Avicha, so there we are. It's Tola b'das acherim. Kilu. Over there, when you accept them, you don't know it's a wild card. You don't know, right? Maybe they'll rule in favor of you, right? You can assume that hopefully they'll rule in favor of you. And when you accepted them as a judge, you accepted them hoping that they would rule in favor of you, but you don't actually know, right? Whereas Tolas b'das atzma is be'etzim, when Shimon says swear to me, he knows that Reuben's going to swear to him. Okay, there's no third party wild card there. Shimon's saying swear, so Reuben swears. So tzricha, we need both the cases of Tola b'das acherim, Tola b'das atzma, because the Tana Tola b'das acherim, if you would only have the scenario, the reisha, where you're accepting Abba v'Avicha, b'hakam Reb Meir, that's where Reb Meir says that he could renege. Because he didn't really, right? So if we say that it's talking about etinoch machlokes, right? So we're talking about when they rule in Shimon's favor, and Reuven needs to pay Shimon. And we say that there's a machlokes, and Reb Meir says that Reuven can renege and say, you know what? I want a retrial with kosher judges. Because, look, maybe when Reuven says, look, I'll accept Abba v'Avicha, because he was hoping that they would rule in his favor. He doesn't know how they're going to rule, but he was hoping they would rule in his favor, but he didn't really kind of, with a whole heart, say, I accept their ultimate verdict. And therefore he can renege. Who, right? He says, who says that they're going to rule in favor of Shimon? Hopefully they'll rule in favor of me. When they rule in favor of Shimon, he could say, you know what? That was unexpected. I want to renege. But in the Sefer, where Shimon says to Reuven, look, just swear on your life, and Reuven swears on his life, maybe there Reb Meir would say, well, Shimon should have expected that Reuven would swear, so he can't renege. Maybe Reb Meir would admit to the Rabbanon. If we would only have the case of the swear, I could argue that that's where the Rabbanon say that Shimon cannot renege, because what did he expect? He told Reuven to swear, and he swore. But in the Reisha, where there's a third party, well, then modelu Rabbanan the Reb Meir. Maybe the Rabbanan would agree with Reb Meir that Reuven would be able to renege and say, "I want to retrial with real judges," because maybe he didn't, he didn't wholeheartedly accept their ruling, since he didn't know how he was hoping that they would rule in his favor. So tzricha, therefore, we need both cases, both the Reisha where of Neman Ale Abba v'Avicha and the Sefer of Dorli b'chai roscha. Amr Rish Lakish says Rish Lakish machlokes lefnei k'ma'adin, says Rish Lakish that the machlokes is dafka before the verdict. Haval achar k'ma'adin, but once there's a verdict, everyone would agree that after the verdict, it's too late, you can't renege. So Rabbi Yochanan says the machlokes is after the verdict. That's the kasha. But do we say that the machlokes is after the verdict? Is Rabbi Yochanan saying that the machlokes is after the verdict, but before the verdict, everyone agrees that you can be choser? Or perhaps ben bazu ve'bazu machlokes. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan says that the machlokes is both la'achar g'mardin and lifnei g'mardin. Tashma kaminir da'amar Rava, says Rava kibel olav karver pasul. Says Rava that if he accepted upon himself somebody who's not a valid judge, for example, a karv or apostle, lifnei g'mardin, if it's before the verdict, yachol lachzabo, he can be choser. La'achar g'mardin, but after the verdict, ein yachol lachzabo, he cannot be choser. Iyamad b'shlam la'achar g'mardin machlokes, aval lifnei g'mardin tivakol yachol lachzabo. So I understand if we say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the machlokes is la'achar g'mardin, but before g'mardin, everyone agrees you can renege. So Rava Damak Rabbi Yochanan v'liba derabbanan. So Rava is holding like Rabbi Yochanan, who says the machlokes is la'achar gmadin, and he's holding like the majority opinion, the rabbis. Rav is holding like the rabbis who say einu yachol lachzor. So la'achar gmadin einu yachol lachzor. But before lifnei gmadin, everyone would agree yachol lachzor. But if you say the machlokes is both la'achar gmadin and lifnei gmadin, well then why would Rava paskin like the Chachamim la'achar gmadin say that you cannot reneg, but before the gmadin he would paskin like Reb Meir? Why would he paskin like Reb Meir lifnei gmadin? So it must be that the machlokes is dafka la'achar gmadin, but lifnei gmadin divrei kol yachol lachzor bo. Rava Damer come on, right? If you say that the machlokes is both, then who's he holding like Ela Shma Mina la'achar gmadin machlokes? Shma Mina. Rather, it must be that the machlokes is dafka la'achar gmadin, but before the gmadin, everyone would agree that you can reneg. Sholach le Rav Nachman bar Rav Yitzchak le Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak sends to Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. Rav Nachman bar Yaakov is Rav Nachman. Tamdenu Rabbeinu teach us lifnei gmadin machlokes or la'achar gmadin machlokes v'alachar k'divrei mi. Is the machlokes before the gmadin or after the gmadin? Who's the halacha like? Sholach le Rav Nachman responds la'achar gmadin machlokes. The machlokes is after the gmadin v'alachar k'divrei chachamim, and the halacha is like the Chacham. Rav Ashi says, this is what was sent by etin lach machlokes or by macholach machlokes. The machlokes by etin lach or macholach. And who do we pass him like? Shalach lei responded by etin lach machlokes. Machlokes by etin lach v'lach k'dev chachamim. And the lach is like the chacham besur masnu achi. That's how they taught it in sur b'pumbedisa masnu achi. But in pumbedisa they explained it in the following way. And Reb Chanina bar Shlamya sholchu lei mi Beirav l'Shmuel. They sent from Beirav to Shmuel. Lamdenu Rabbeinu teach us. Lifnei gmadim v'kanu biyadomai. What if it was before the gmadim, but they made a kinyan on the judges? Shachlu, so he sends to them, ein la'achar gmadim kinyan klum. Well, if you made a kinyan, well then that's it. It's official. You can't renege on anything. Gewaldig. Should I go weiter? Oh, I don't know. Should I go weiter now, or should I? I don't know. What should I do, Chavish? Should I go weiter or not? I think maybe I'll stop here. All right. Well, that was Daf Chof Dal of Masechta Sanhedrin. We had some interesting agaritas at the beginning about Talmid Chacham in Eretz Yisrael and in Bavel. And then we got to a new Mishnah about Neman Olei Abba, Neman Olei Avicha, Neman Olei Shlosh Bakar, and Doli B'chai Roshcha. Machlokas between Reb Meir, who says that you can renege, the Chum says you can't renege. We saw that Machlokas about is the Machlokas after Gmadin, before Gmadin, is it by Etin Lach, is by Macholach. So different kind of things like that. Peace out.